Very good. It's 1:30, so we will begin the liquor control agenda for today. We have a few items on the agenda. We'll begin with number one, approved minutes of the March 16th, 2022 regular meeting. If everybody's had a chance to look at them, if there's any changes or corrections, we'll sure accept those. And if not, we'll accept a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number two, review liquor applications. 2A, application for the transfer of a Class ABH RZ alcoholic beverage license to Blarney Stone Pub Hodo LLC, doing business as Blarney Stone Pub Hodo, to be located at 101 Broadway. Steve, you're going to get us started?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, and welcome committee members. So I'm sure everybody saw in the paper by now that the Hodo transferred or sold to a group headed by Jim Pullman. The group is based out of Bismarck area, and they own and operate the Blarney Stones I know they have Bismarck and Fargo, and I think there's one other. I'm not sure if I remember if it's Grand Forks or Sioux Falls. But anyway, they want to bring that same kind of concept downtown to the Hodo. They've been operating the hotel continuously during the time even that the bar and the restaurant have been closed down. And so, it comes to you for a consideration, and we've done the background check. There were a few minor items in there, but also were very dated. So I don't know if there are any questions. And I know we just got the background check to you, today.
Are there any comments or questions? And Chief, I don't know if there's any comments you want to make. Otherwise, if there's any questions for the chief about any of the, obviously, I believe Jim Pullman was a politician, so I don't know if there's any marks against that, or if we get some deductions, maybe the police have some kind of deduction for that. But anyway, any other comments or questions?
We try not to hold things against politicians.
I have a quick question, Dave.
Yes,
Go ahead.
So is this group buying the whole property? They'll
Yes.
operate the hotel too?
correct.
And will there be a roof bar again? Is that part of the
I
license?
think that's it's part of the license
Okay.
premise, and I think that's part of their concept. They did say they're going to make that main floor into more of that Blarney Stone type of restaurant. And they said that they have a space that they'll be able to have a room that you can hold private events, maybe up to 40 people or something like that. So they're going to utilize that space also.
Well, that's good. Well, best of luck to them. That's a great property.
So Steve, the other thing, can you talk a little bit about, so is this license, obviously it was an ongoing business. Can you talk a little about the transfer, how that would go versus if the business had closed? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So because they kept the hotel open and continued to have alcohol sales to their hotel guests, I remember last year during renewal, we looked at the amount of alcohol sales and we said, it seems off, what's going on? And so we did call them and they said, well, yeah, we do have the bar and the restaurant closed, but we are continuing to use that alcohol license selling to hotel guests. So they've had continuous use of that throughout the time. And so we feel that it is a going concern and should be eligible for transfer.
And so can I ask Steve, is this one that the Hodo did own, or is this one of the more recent ones where it's not owned and it comes back to the city?
No, it is one that was issued prior to that 2014 date when we changed the ordinance so that licenses would come back to the city. So that's kind of the where we're at now. The initial issuance fee on this one, because there are so many other requirements. They're required to maintain a concierge service and to have a valet service and daily room service and different things like that. It's really geared around that hotel. And since they are planning on continuing operating that, then they do qualify for this. And the initial issuance fee on this one is at $15,000 rather than at that 100 or that other dollar amount a little higher.
Very good. Any other comments or questions from anyone? Anybody in the audience? I don't know if anybody wishes to make a comment or question. Otherwise, I think we're ready for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Very good, thank you. And number 2B, Fargo Residence Inn, background check on new officer of company, no concerns raised. Steve?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So this is almost like highly unusual that a company changes their general manager and actually contacts us. I know going forward, the chief wants to make sure that we figure out a way to do that we get those background checks in. But this company reached out to us, said, hey, we have a new general manager there. What would you like to do? And so we gave them the information, ran it through the background check, and he came back with no issues or concerns. And so it's, I guess, just a matter of approving the new manager for the Residence Inn.
So I guess I have a question. So then going forward, is this something that we might do for everybody? But right now, we don't have a policy.
Well, yes, correct. We intend to do this for everybody that changes ownership or changes, not ownership, but manager. We would like to be able to do those background checks. The problem that we're kind of facing is the methodology on how we're doing the background checks. We may have to go to the state to see if there's a little bit of language change in the state law to allow us to be able to do those more efficiently.
So will this come through liquor control and then go to the city commission? Like if we make a policy change, is that how it would go?
Yes,
But you're still working on the wording to have it done correctly.
correct. Yep.
I think that, I don't know if anybody has any comments, but I think that's a great thing. I think we were all a little bit concerned that we all follow the same rules and they keep us updated. I think that's a great thing. Any other comments or questions? So is there any action you want us?
I think, we have to approve the new general manager, right?
Okay,
I think that would be appropriate. Yeah.
okay. I'm sorry. Any other comments or questions about it?
I was gonna say, as a catch for, until you get the language for how to get the new general managers in the system, could this become part of like the annual check-in? They have to, is there a form that we could
Yes.
add that?
Yes, thank you, Lydia. So we just sent out the renewal forms for this coming year. And again, we had some goals that we weren't able to quite get to this year because of those language changes we're going to need at state law. So we just sent out our renewal forms. So what we do when we get those back then is we compare the information on those renewal forms to what we have in the system. And I think one of the changes that we can initiate this year, it'll be after the fact, they would have already made their change, but we can then request to do the background check on anybody that we see changed as in the managers. So I think our staff can accommodate that.
Great.
I guess I think it's a good thing, but the other thing it would make it easier for is for the police, if you have an issue, then you have a contact person that's current.
Exactly.
Versus sometimes we don't always have the most current information. So I think it's not only beneficial, well, there's lots of reasons for it. So I don't know if anybody has any other comments, but I think that's good. Go ahead.
So if we find out then at that license renewal that there's a new, and if we find out with the investigation and the background checks that maybe we should really look into this, is there something we can do retroactively if we're not?
I think we'd just, this is all new territory, so
Okay.
we'd have to initiate a conversation with the ownership group.
Okay.
At that point and just say, hey, we did this background check, we've got these concerns, and then hopefully they can address those concerns, or, maybe they go to a higher kind of watch level or something like that.
But to me, as a commission, if we come across where you have a new manager and they don't pass, then we would, that's on us, then we would vote on it and not accept them, and then they'd have to find a new candidate. Wouldn't that some kind of be how it would go?
Exactly, yep. I do want to make a comment too on the Residence Inn. They have the ABH limited license, so it allows them to run the manager special and then also to have that sundry shop. So it's not like it's a full bar or something like that, right? It's just for their guests. And if they're just doing the manager special, it's a food and a beverage and that type of thing, and it's complimentary. So,
But that's not uncommon. They're not the only ones that have that license. There's several hotels that have the same situation, right?
I'm sure we have a dozen of them. Yep.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you, Fargo Residence Inn, for letting us know. Move to approve?
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next item is the Police Department monthly report. Chief.
Good afternoon, everyone. You've got a chance to look at the report. We had a fairly lively St. Patrick's Day, not terrible, but we do have a couple of investigations still open, that felony assault case, and then there's a fraud investigation that's still outstanding. And then I think, other than a number of potential over-intoxication issues, which we've talked about before, and I think need to sit down and think about how we might be able to better address this, putting multiple heads together. But
Chief, I got a question on that
Sure.
particular issue. I noticed the windbreak with 8 visits over that period, probably half of them or more were considerably over intoxicated people. What's law enforcement doing to enforce that? I mean, isn't that a violation of one of the code sections? I mean, when you see somebody with a .277, is there
So-
further investigation?
So yes and no. So the problem is, in order to prove that, we have to be able to show that they got over intoxicated at windbreak. And unless someone's in there to show that, because some of these cases, if you look at some of the details, these people are even saying they came from other bars, and then they went to this bar, and then they had more, and then they figured out they had too much, and then they had an issue. So I think the city attorney would probably comment on this a little bit too in terms of provability, but it's been very difficult to prove that unless we have a very obvious case right in front of us where you walked in and you were overserved while at that bar by that bartender, and we were able to put that together. So that's the difficulty that we really have with that.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
If I had my first few cocktails at Bulldogs and that ended up at Windbreak, and that's where law enforcement ran into me,
Yes.
wouldn't Windbreak be the last place that served me where I was over intoxicated?
Well, here, the problem is your metabolism, your metabolizing of the alcohol. So how much did you have at the poorhouse or Bulldog or wherever you were, and when that actually metabolizes and affects you, and what alcohol rate were you at when you walked into Windbreak? So I was just thinking about this as it kind of going towards, I think, your question. We talk about ID scanners. You almost should have a PBT to prevent some of these people from getting into a tavern who are already intoxicated. But I don't want to throw other ideas out there that will give everyone pause. But I don't know if Nancy wants to comment a little bit about provability of over-serving, but it's kind of a difficult one. Call a friend.
I can weigh in, and yes, there has been changes in the recent past, too, that we've been looking at. How do we prove that over-intoxication happened at that location? And they can start looking at receipts for sales and credit cards receipts and those kinds of things to determine how much was served at that particular location. Of course, it's hard to prove whether it was the first or second drink, but at what point did that server know that that person had consumed too much alcohol and then was continued to serve them? That's a point in time that's pretty hard to determine. So there is over-intoxication happening at a number of places. We have changed some of the ordinance language to be able to prove a little bit more how that might happen, but that is an investigation tactic that the police must undertake and get that information from that particular location.
There's a lot of bars that are not on this report, and there's a lot of bars that are on this report maybe once, but there's a couple bars that are on here a lot, and the Windbreak seems to be kind of the leader.
I totally agree with you, but under the current ordinance language, we don't really have a way to address that. And I think if we're going to look at ordinances and how we manage licenses, that there might be a place in the ordinances that we account for things like that, because yes, there's a very common theme about why when we go to certain establishments, everyone's always very intoxicated. And I think we need some type of different ordinance to help us regulate that, to give the board some opportunity to address it, because the other things that sometimes come into play here are our ability to get the video. You know, if we don't have the video to show what they served and who served them, a couple of these people came to our attention after bar closed, so there's nobody there. We don't get video when we ask for it because there's no requirement to do it. We just run into, there's a lot of things that don't give us much opportunity to investigate those. But I also think that we could come up with some ordinances relative to this type of an issue that would help give the board some regulatory authority. And that would be part of, I think, a side discussion with the city attorney. And but where we currently sit, we're in a pretty difficult position to do that unless we happen to be sitting right there and we can make those observations.
But Chief, the one thing, I mean, like right now, obviously, we have a chronic violator. And so we as a liquor board, we have ways to, I mean, we could put them on probation right now if we wanted to. Isn't that correct? I mean, we hold their, or maybe we can't. That's the thing. To me, they have a license and we're the city issues the license. There's no guarantee that they're going to keep that license. And especially if they're a non-cooperative. So I guess that's my concern. We do have lots of tools at our disposal. So Nancy, if you could weigh in on that.
I am looking for the ordinance, but there is an ordinance that does address if you find that there is a public safety concern. It's kind of a catch-all that you could use. I will locate that and give you that number here shortly.
So I have a question to add. How would we communicate with them? Do they even know they have a problem? Do they realize they have the problem?
I think they do. We've tried talking to them on a number of occasions. We've gotten, I guess, lukewarm response in terms of when we were dealing with them on the underage drinking issues that we were uncovering there, and that was something that we could act upon because we could prove that.
Okay. Well, that would, to me, and that would be similar to the problem place we had last year where there seems like there's negligence, and I would trust the opinions coming from your department, whether they're cooperating or not. Because to me, that the negligence part is where we have to act if they're not doing anything about their problem.
And I guess my opinion is the whole notifying them to have a probationary thing and then say, if you don't correct, then you're going to lose your license. And it's a significant amount of money losing a license. So I think that would prompt them to maybe take, I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they've been less than enthusiastic about following the rules. And at a certain point, if you're not going to do that, clearly they know that and they're not going to do anything about it. So I think it's up to us and then the city commission. And I guess what I would like to do is say, you're on probation, and if they don't change, then you're going to lose their license. I think that would get a lot more attention than what they're doing now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work with the city attorney on that. So we'll look at it and see what we can come up with for you.
Can we also request them to require them to have a camera in there that we furnish that's going to be working?
I think we can probably request anything, but we can't.
Okay.
A request isn't enforceable. We've requested ID scanners too, right?
So what has to happen before that can be a requirement?
Has to be an ordinance change.
Nancy, are
Okay.
you going to add something?
That's correct. So I'm looking at 25-15-12 licenses, termination, suspension, revocation, and sanctions. Under B6, the licensee conducts his business in a manner which results in, encourages, or is conducive to the creation of a disturbance of the peace, disorderly conduct, or any other violations of federal, state, or city laws. That is where the commission, in its discretion, may suspend or revoke the license. And then, of course, there's process for how that will take place.
I will prepare that for the next meeting.
Okay.
That's great. And I do think we have to do something because this has not been the first time and they are not being responsive. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Chief. And
Thank you.
Nancy, if you could do some more research as to make sure that we want to make sure we follow the rules correctly and do the right process. So, any other comments about that?
Chief, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no problem, sir.
So we only covered one. Was there anything else you wanted to cover in here?
No, that was really it. I think that's an obvious issue there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was prepared to make the comments that you all made. You beat me to it. But I do have some data, and that is that last year there were 81 alcohol-related deaths in Cass County alone. And I shudder to think of what could have happened had that semi-driver gotten on the interstate and So it's imperative, I think, and I'm looking forward to anything that you can provide for us so that we can act on it.
Absolutely. No, happy to have your support on that. I'll have it for you at the next meeting. And then just as a reminder, we've got that May 3rd. I don't know if you were going to talk about that, Steve, but I didn't see it on the agenda, just so that we don't forget. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, the FMCT request to inactivate the license for near future during the time without public-facing location. Steve, can you talk about that, please?
Yes. So a little background on the FMCT. They operated in their location at Island Park for many years, getting e-permits. And at some point, they said, we qualify as a club to get a club license. And so they secured that club license and then operated a couple of years in that location with that license. And then, as you know, they had some structural damage with their building. From what I understand, that building is going to need to be raised and something new, they'll have to find a new location. They have been operating at, I believe it was 6 Broadway for a temporary period. We did approve moving that location to that, or moving the license to that location so they could operate. Now they're going to move, I believe it's over to Moorhead. And so they want to maintain that license, but obviously they can't use it in Moorhead. So their hope is that in a year or two that they're able to come back to Fargo and then reactivate the license. Nancy pointed out to me that what we should do to remain consistent is to put a date on here. So what she's recommending, and I concur, is that we should make this a 6-month time frame where there's a section in the code 2515-12 that says that you have to continuously use the license or else the license comes back to the city. And so what we do is we waive that provision of that ordinance so that they can kind of put the license off to the side for a while. So they won't have any activity here in Fargo, until they're able to reopen or find a new location. But I think that Nancy is correct. We should make that a 6-month and then have them come back and renew it every 6 months, if nothing else, just so that we're both on the same page of where they're at with that process.
That's very good. Any comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll
The only question I'd have, does the state have an inactivity law? Do we know? Where a license goes back if it's inactive?
Well, I think that I know the state needs, you have to renew it with the state, and they'll have to renew their license with us.
Okay.
So they'll pay the annual renewal fee, but they won't have any, they won't be selling any alcohol, so no income coming in. And I had mentioned that to them, and they were fine with that. The other alternative for them was to just let the license come back, and then when they do open up, they would just have to apply and get the license again. But the person I spoke to said that this was a better route for them. So I would imagine the state is going to require the same thing, just annual renewal of that license.
Does that ever expire? The annual, how many times can they renew? Do we go on and on 5 years down the road, or when does it terminate?
Well, that's up to the board and up to the city commission. But if at some point you say, hey, are you ever going to reuse this again? And we'll give you one more time to renew, and then you need to be open. We currently have at least one restaurant bar that has been doing that for a few years now, as they've been trying to find a place to relocate to, and then the pandemic hit, and so it wasn't a good time to do any of that stuff. That licensee now has secured a location. They have a rental agreement with the developer that's going to build the bar restaurant for them. And so we anticipate that, with supply chain issues and stuff, it may take another year for them to get open, but we do see that coming to an end at some point.
Yeah, I just think that the only problem here is that, it creates a precedent that I think is fair, but I think it has to work this would be a license that is not marketable, but there are people with licenses that for whatever reason they close or get suspended. They should have a reasonable amount of time too to get their license sold.
Right.
And because it's an asset for them. So I just think we have to keep that in mind, the consistency of saying, yeah, we'll cooperate with this, so.
This is a club, though. I mean, I think it's different enough if we were to deal with something larger like that. There would be a larger discussion. We could set times on it. I think it's a much
Right.
bigger discussion. But I think this is specific enough for a small group. We want them to come back.
So I can just jump in on that a little bit. It is provided for all licensees under the ordinances, that if they cease to do business and there are certain timelines, it's 1215A2. Then there's also the provision that upon written request of the licensee, the commission, in its discretion and for good cause shown, may extend the date upon which the business shall be deemed to have ceased. So essentially what you're doing is extending it, and all licensees have that opportunity to request that extension.
Okay, good.
Very good. Any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll accept a motion.
Move to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Last item on the agenda, number 5, follow-up discussion regarding compliance checks and server training. Kay.
Do you want to start with this, Steve?
Sure. So at the last meeting, we discussed some ways to maybe beef up the server training, or maybe, some possible, maybe stronger penalties or some of that kind of stuff. And what we ended up, the takeaway was that I organized a meeting with Kay, and we ended up with, I believe it was 8 different businesses on a nice cross-section of businesses. We had bar restaurants, and off sales. So I think we had covered all of the different areas, and we had a very good discussion, a little over an hour, and I believe that we kind of came up with some potential ways that we can improve the situation. I think when we look at the number of compliance failures that are occurring, it tells us that something is not working right, and that maybe we need to adjust either our training or our method of testing, or something like that. And so, Kay, do you want to talk about the
Sure.
takeaways? Sure.
Yep. It was very informational, and I was really grateful, and I thank those folks who came to the table that day and gave of their time to help me understand better what the situations are. And I think throughout all of it, there were 3 main themes that came across to me that I confirmed with them, and that is an interest in online server training, an interest in more intensive face-to-face training on
De-escalation?
thank you, de-escalation, and recognizing when they need assistance with that. And the third thing was, there was a lot of positive talk about the Cops and Shops program that was instituted here several years ago. And Steve was going to look into that and find out a little bit more information about what that actually was or is. And I also did a lot of research on online server training. That's what piqued my interest to begin with. And I had a meeting in Chicago on other business, and so I contacted the gentleman who issues liquor licenses for the state of Illinois, because they had the training there, the online training that I was interested in. And it's called Bassett Training, and it is training for bartenders and servers alike. And it's various modules, and at the end of each module, there's a quiz. And I really appreciated that because it provides a lot of going back and reviewing what you learned, and then you go take this quiz and you have an option to change your answers if you got them wrong. And at the very end, you go through a review again. It's a 4-hour training, and then you have an exam. So you have a test that you have to pass at 70%. And what I appreciated about this training, and I also started the training for Minnesota because I was interested in that one too, and there's a real emphasis on understanding blood alcohol levels and trying to get at what overserving is and signs to recognize. But what I learned from the liquor owners who met with me is that, people are changing, And it's difficult to assist when people get rowdy. Attitudes are changing and people are mad, and so we have to find ways to help our servers to work with that so that everybody is safe. And that's covered in some of this training, but I've got a lot more work to do with this. I'm just getting started. And I think the voice that I'm missing now in all of this picture is that of the servers. So I am meeting with Public Health next week, and I'm gonna find a way to interview the servers. I need their feedback so that I've got a more complete picture of what's going on. I can sit here and say, well, this is what's going on, I think this is what's going on, and they're doing this and they're doing that, but that's not realistic to think that that's totally accurate. So I need their voice. So I'm going to prepare a survey and see if I can't work with Public Health to get that out there. I think that online server training could be really beneficial in that they can take it at the time that's best for them. They can log out and log back in at a time that's best for them. And hopefully that will get us to a better place. I am concerned about, I'm concerned about the servers and the fact that many of them on the first infraction lose their job. And I understand the rationale behind that. However, I believe in second chances, and I wonder if by doing that, if we are cutting out servers who probably would end up being a much better server after having that first experience. Would they be more in tune to what's going on and learn more about it before they get another fine? And so I need their feedback to see how that's working for them. But overall, I think that until we get the matrix figured out and update it and revise it, that it's imperative for us to be consistent in how we approach and how we deal with infractions. So with the compliance failures, I think that if there's a failure, we follow the matrix until we decide to update it and what that looks like when we do. So that's where I'm at.
That's excellent, Kay, and thank you for all your hard work. That's obviously, I guess I have a question for so you talked about the whole helping servers with people that are violent. Is that, do the police, is it part of their training, or how does that, I guess I'm curious because you want them to be safe, like you said.
Exactly, and I think what I need to do more with, I have the contact information to a communications person that the gentleman in Chicago gave me. And so it's called video judo. I mean, he listed off different techniques that they learn in that training and how to de-escalate situations when people are, because we know what can happen if somebody drinks too much. And we gotta protect our servers too, so.
And to me, the online training benefits our staff too, because this takes a lot of time at Cass County Health, where they try to have all these different times to have, and if it's online training, it's much more, I think it would be beneficial for them too. And I guess the other question, so let's say like in Illinois, they do it, is that something that we could buy? Or
That was the question that I had too, and he said, if you're interested in online server training, then they will find you. And they've got dozens and dozens of different companies that provide their server training for them, that are approved by the state of Illinois. And I looked at North Dakota, and North Dakota, the state, also has a server training that I didn't know about until I looked at that. So I'll probably take that one too, just to see and compare.
So the thing that we might want to do going forward is doing an RFP, and just saying a request for bids and just to see what we get back. Because obviously you have to have budget and figure out how much it costs. Do you know what I mean? And so that might be a potential thing to do. And
It doesn't cost it doesn't cost us anything. They make their money from the servers taking their training.
But I'm,
They want to accommodate us.
but I'm just to know,
Yeah.
somebody has to pay just to know
Yeah.
what it is and what are the options. So maybe that would be a step for us to take in the future. It's just, I don't know if that makes sense.
And I'm not discounting online server training by any means. I just think that this is a step to get them up to speed quicker. And I don't see why a server can't be server trained before they start the job if they're taking it online. And that's something that I need to ask the servers too, what prevents them from getting trained right away. But I think that face-to-face is hugely important. And I think if there is a failure with the online training, that's the first requirement is that they have to do face-to-face. Because it just needs to be bolstered and enhanced. So I'm not discounting face-to-face at all. I think it works in tandem with online, so.
Well, this is awesome, Kate, and I appreciate your passion and you're working hard, so I appreciate it, because you're obviously making us all better informed. And so I do think if it's okay for the next agenda or in the future, just to talk about what are our options for online, see what the different companies are, and I do think that would be something, I think that would benefit us all, so.
Just to clarify, Kate, are you talking about a supplement to the current training or to replace it or
Well,
either or?
I think either or. I
Yeah.
think online should be a definite option.
Okay.
And something that our police department and whomever else, public health, needs to approve it. It needs to cover what we need covered. But also to look at, and I need to find out where I can find the word again, de-escalation training. And to help with that, because that should be a separate thing on its own. It's touched on in these online trainings, but I think we need to have a complete module that's just that, and really intensive.
Just not totally on the subject, but we were in Nashville over the weekend and we got carded at every bar.
All right?
I got carded.
I got
with my gray
carded in
hair.
Chicago too.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say the point you made about how if it's online, flexible times when people can do it, that we really can address this. Frankly, it's been a very awkward aspect of the server training, the duration of time between when they can start working and the training. I understand why that's in place, but that aspect of it is very attractive to me, the idea that we could shorten that interval greatly, and our servers can be more confident in going into these new jobs. We want them to feel like ready.
Right.
And not, in danger of getting in major trouble because they don't know better. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Go ahead, Rob.
I agree, Kate. That's impressive research you've done, and anybody that's worked for a company that has an HR department knows that there's continuous HR training online. So maybe it's a program that assists their original training too, that there's continuing updates. The one area that you talked about that I think we need to talk about some more is on the compliance failures, is that we just follow the matrix. I think we need to continue to ask people to come here and explain their situation and ask for lenience. And I think we should have the ability to have that lenience because, one, we learn that from that way and Dave, you've always been respectful of the people who do come here and talk about their situation. Last meeting, I voted against the matrix on two items. One, the gentleman was here and I think made a good case. I'm not sure what happened there, what the final decision was. Another one I voted against, decided not to speak, but I knew their situation and what happened during the compliance failure. And the details from the employee may or may not have been true, but I also know this business well enough and the people there, how seriously they take it. So mistakes do get made, and that becomes, I think, our debate. To what extent do we want to punish them automatically, or is there going to be I think that's part of our, because we're just recommending to the council or the city commission. is it up to us to investigate a little bit and find out what's happening and why people are failing? And, you know, somebody that fails once every 6 years, they might have, you know, caught 3,000 minors in that time too. So I don't think it's an accurate representation of the professionalism and how passionate the trade is about this. Now, certainly there are people that are negligent, et cetera, but I would like to keep those discussions open where when there are compliance failures that we investigate them, or if people want to speak, they're allowed to do that. I don't think it should just be automatic.
I agree with what Kate talked about, the people that if you're a server and then you get fired, you lose your job with that. The thing that troubles me is they could, especially nowadays, it's hard to find people to work. That's the first thing, but also those people could learn from that lesson. And then obviously the other thing that bothers me is the person that served them loses their job. The minor that breaks the law, now the penalties are much less. So it's kind of, we're sending mixed messages. I've already preached about that, but it doesn't make sense to me. And so I do think there's things that we can improve about this whole system, and I think that's what we're all about here. And so, but I will say, I really appreciate Kay because she works really hard, and that makes this whole group do a better job. So once again, thank you, and I think that's what we're all here for, to try to make the whole system better and public safety and all those things. So. It's 2:11. Thank you, everybody, for coming, unless we have more.
Excuse me, Commissioner, I do have a couple more things. I'd like to make one more.
Steve, as long as you make it quick, you can do it as long as you want. Go ahead.
One more comment. The Cops in Shops was something that was from the early 2000s. It was a grant-funded program. Primarily, it was the county, but it had some West Fargo and Fargo PD involved also. It's kind of like where they do highway enforcement. You know the cops are going to be out and they advertise it and all that stuff. But the plainclothes officers came in and they basically went around to the tables and and carded people and that type of stuff, and or people that they saw were being overserved. So it kind of gave them a little more of an enforcement issue. Without it being that kind of other operation where you're bringing the minor in and that type of stuff. So they were actually catching the businesses that were offending, So follow up on those compliance failures, the city commission, there were 2 that wanted to speak to the commission. And in both of those cases, the commission voted to, as you call it, follow the matrix or apply the penalty. And then finally, as Chief alluded to, May 3rd, we have our annual meeting. If there's anybody out there watching, at your desk or something like that, May 3rd is a mandatory meeting. We have times at 10, 2, and 6, I believe. And so we'll continue to send out the notices on that. They have to attend that meeting or else there's a penalty for not attending. So.
Very good. Anything else to add?
Now I'm done.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Have a good afternoon.